listing?
No, that's you.
Next to the... Okay.
I now see that
so
it is
it
on
claims... Yeah, okay, so now we're live, and I'm in my YouTube account. So where would you be if you were alive? Huh. So now I don't know how to find that URL. Oops. No, I really don't want to do that.
Sorry, that's me mentioning you.
Oh yeah, good. Well, but what I'm not finding is the live broadcast. And I know I connected the accounts together. It made me do that.
Well, mine says on air at the top up here, so I assume that we're out on the web anyway.
Web somewhere.
Yeah.
Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, you'd like that to actually like be a button that did something.
Right, yeah, link. Get the link here. Ah, there it is. You click the embed link. It's waiting, it's waiting. Yes, here it is. Okay. All right, so I'm typing the chat. Okay, all right, here we go. Oh dear, now I'm listening to myself talk, and that's just weird. Here's the URL that you guys can share out. It is. It's the embed. Do you guys have the link at the top that says embed?
No.
Yeah, that's you.
Yeah, so evidently only I
Okay.
have it. So there it is now. That's the one you can share out.
All right.
And I will do that.
Does that mean that they can
So they'll be able
they
to
can
watch
do,
live.
Well, I can
And
see
do
us on YouTube anyway, so.
Yes.
Do the questions from YouTube, like, oh god, we don't have to read YouTube comments, right?
I think we do actually. I'll keep track of it.
Hopefully, I can read it through the Google Plus or the Google Hangout view because I have HerpDerp installed on all of my browsers, which is like the single best thing I've done for the internet in 3 years, but would make it difficult.
What's it
HerpDerp
called?
is a HerpDerp. It's a set of plugins that replace all YouTube comments individually with like username herpderp. Username.
Okay.
So you can click
So
on
like
it.
the Swedish chef.
Yeah, you could click on it and look underneath it, but it means that there's no accidental like load through of like, oh, I wonder what this is. Like, oh no, like you just
Somebody
essentially
else
have
jumped in there. I don't know who that is.
you get a brown paper
Michael
wrap.
Phelps.
Oh.
You get a brown paper wrap all of YouTube comments, which is pretty appropriate.
I'm Michael
Good
Phelps.
evening, Michael.
Hi.
We're just getting started.
It's
Well, not
interesting
really.
to see
If for
Karen.
another 5 minutes.
You're here for another 5 minutes?
We'll start at 8 o'clock officially.
Okay.
This is the pre-show or whatever we call this.
So this is the pre-show before the show itself, Tim.
Yeah.
Okay, Tim. So, Karen,
Yes.
Andrew, Tim, pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet
As you
you.
already know, I'm Michael Phelps.
Are you a teacher in Virginia?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Should I be?
Well, no. What do you do? We're just curious. That's all.
I mean, if it's only teachers in Virginia, I mean, I'm a fellow Star Trek fan, if that counts for anything.
Great.
That always carries a lot.
I mean, you've got to love the bobblehead Spock. I love that. I'm very observant. I feel like I'm auditioning for a date or something right now.
No, so we're going to be talking about the pop-up hackerspace that we're running at this year's VSTE conference, which is the annual conference for EdTech in Roanoke. Wait, it's not annual in Roanoke. It's alternate annual.
Wait, Roanoke's still around?
Yes, it's a different Roanoke. I was similarly confused.
I thought Roanoke was lost.
That apparently they made another one safely like 300 miles inland.
Way inland, yeah.
So it's like 300 miles inland, no sharks can attack, and
I'm not
I
even sure there's
honestly
a river
think bad
close by.
sharks were what did in the first Roanoke.
Yeah, my previous exposure until I went to VSTE was I read that Neil Gaiman 1666 series, which is like the Marvel Universe rebooted in Roanoke in like early colonial period. So
Really?
yeah, not that one. Yeah, it's not bad. There's a lot of like really cutesy like, oh, it's Peter yeah. They just like drop Spider-Man into random character, like he used to be in a doublet, so you know. That's
Yeah,
cool.
but that's not as crazy as what's going on in the Marvel Universe right now, I mean. Dr. Octopus is in Peter Parker's body. I'm still trying to figure that one out.
It's true.
I'm not sure I like that series quite right now, but yeah, it's interesting anyway.
They're about to reboot
Oh yeah, they're going to
Spider-Man
reboot the whole thing, aren't
2099,
they?
which might be interesting. I mean, he's trapped in the present since he destroyed the future timeline, so... You also know I'm a comic book enthusiast, too.
I gather, yeah, you know more about it than I do. I'm only a casual reader.
I've got a lot of unique talents that could make this interesting.
So, are you a PBS watcher? Last night they had a great couple hours on superheroes, and a lot of it was the old comic books and how the superhero comic books changed based on a lot of politics, and you know what happened in World War II was different than what happened.
They actually Superman as a prime example in that, and how he actually changed over the years, which was amazing. Great job.
Yeah, right. It was really interesting.
It was very interesting how they actually, just the dynamic of Superman changed because of the political platform that played a precedence during his evolution from just a superhero standpoint.
Yeah, I always like the discussion of that transition about how essentially the ecosystem, the narrative ecosystem of comics, as moving through and not only like or reacting to outside forces, but reacting to its own internal forces. I mean, I think at least the first 18 issues of Warren Ellis's Planetary is the best like in fiction discussion of that I've ever seen, of like this relatively vibrant, thriving universe with this incredible intellectual diversity, and then you put like one batch of superheroes in the middle of it, and they go and ruin the whole stupid thing. And they squeeze everything else out.
Okay, so now we're going to have to throw a comic book thread into the hackerspace too.
What is the hackerspace? In 50 words or less, can you explain what I just jumped into?
Sure. The hackerspace at VSTE is a pop-up open access space providing tools, prompts, and time for teachers to experiment with, I don't know,
Pretty much anything that's not normal.
Yeah, I would say the new literacy of construction and making.
So I should be a teacher in Virginia for this hangout. I understand.
No, not necessarily, but that's where we're going to be going. So
that is certainly our intended audience.
I saw Josh pop in there. I wonder if he was supposed to be. He said he was coming, so
I'm sure he'll pop back in soon.
And there were a couple of other people from our area that said they might come too, but I don't know. We had a little wrench thrown in the mix by our bureaucracy, in that they're not going to give us administrative leave to come to conferences unless the county's paying the way to go there. So, which
That is an
I
interesting way to
actually
double
I
down
heard
on
a
that.
little of that today.
it doesn't matter. I'm still coming. So,
Good, good.
Tim, it
So,
wouldn't really be a party without you there.
yeah, right.
well, it's 8 o'clock, at least according to my clock, anyway. So.
All right, well, I'll do the official kickoff here, and I find these very interesting because I have no idea if someone's actually watching on YouTube either. But welcome, everyone. I'm Karen Richardson. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Society for Technology and Education. Welcome aboard. This evening we are joined by Tim Stahmer and Andrew Carle, who are chairing and I guess co-chairing, I don't know, do you guys have
No
unofficial
co-chairs,
titles
that's
too? Co-chairing the new Hackerspace feature, which will be held at our upcoming conference, December 8th, 9th, and 10th at the Hotel Roanoke and Conference Center in Roanoke, Virginia, not North Carolina. And we're excited about this space. It's new for us, and I'm not going to even try to introduce it because that's Tim and Andrew's job, and we're very excited to hear about what they'll be doing. So welcome Michael Phelps, who's in the Hangout room, and other folks. If you have that link, you're welcome to join us here. We've got some spaces available, and meanwhile I'm going to open it up to Tim and Andrew, who I think were in the midst of describing the hackerspace in 50 words or less.
Well, we'll probably go over 50 words, but
okay.
The origins of this whole thing were kind of that, we looked at some of the things that had been done at other conferences for kind of informal discussion and sharing sorts of opportunities. And if you look around, there's the big Ed Camp movement all over the place where people get together and just form sorts of learning opportunities around the ideas that they bring themselves. And so this is going to be a combination of that kind of thing. We've got some people that we're going to schedule into the space to talk about maker spaces and hacking hardware and hacking software and setting up your own web presence and things like that. And then we're going to have some more informal type discussions of just about anything that people want to talk about. I mean, we're not going to make this a big formal sort of deal. It's all about people connecting with each other and talking and sharing ideas. Andrew?
Yeah, I certainly think that's a dominant theme of it. One of the things that I've noticed at my conference experience over the last 2 or 3 years is that my bag was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Like the amount of stuff I wanted to take to show that physically existed was just out of control for somebody who kind of grew up in a digital world and expected to never have to carry anything more than the particular like laptop and screen that I needed for access at a particular point. I suddenly had like a bag full of wires and stuff, primarily reflecting kid work and the kind of the projects and tools that my kids were experimenting with that were so turning into such powerful learning experiences for them. So rather than ask everybody to bring their own collection of magic tricks, or if they do want to bring their own collection of magic tricks, as Josh has figured out the battery-powered way to do, we wanted to make sure that the hackerspace was a place where those things could be shared and shown a little bit more, with a little bit more space to breathe than just outside the conference room door as one group is piling out and the other group is flooding in. We wanted to make sure that there was a space that was hospitable to sustained conversations and sustained inquiry. So if you want to dive deep into something you've learned that day, there's seating and couches and access and space to do it. And probably build a cohort around you who are going to dive deep, if not in the same topic, then in similar waters.
Yeah, one of the things I'd like to see to come out of this is that we get people to make connections with each other that they can sustain and grow outside of the conference. Because at this point, some of these people are experimenting with things in their classroom, and they're not aware that maybe somebody in the next county over, or somewhere else in the area is doing similar things or doing things that they would like to try. And so the more we can help them connect with each other, I think the more valuable this whole thing's going to be.
Now, Tim, bringing that up, I did want to actually ask. I do novice interviews for fun, so pardon me if the journalistic mindset in me is coming out right now. But how are you working Apple's cloud into this type of software?
I'm not sure we're talking about any particular, vendor sort of thing. We certainly aren't going to turn this over to a lot of vendors. As far as,
I just mean that type of storage system, how would that actually play into? I mean, because that's relatively newer software for, at least from a saving perspective, in a storage device.
Well, certainly, there's a lot of clouds out there, and I'm not going to tell somebody that one is better than the other. I think we, kind of get people to share how they're using these kinds of tools rather than any specific tool.
Yeah, absolutely. As much as there's a whole bunch of, as much as it's a tech conference and there's tool use involved, I think one of the things that I see the Hackerspace as being a nice counterweight to is the fact that there's a lot of ways that technology is kind of drafted into particular roles in public school systems, and the Hackerspace, if anything, should be a kind of free-flowing spotlight on all the things that aren't that. So it's not about server closets, it's not about device rollouts, it's not about testing infrastructure or managing ebook licenses. Like all of the things that you have to worry about at scale, the Hackerspace is focused on the other end of the spectrum.
And I will say that there's plenty of that stuff at VSTE already. I mean, I'm not going to diss the vendors because they help pay the freight, and there'll be people who will be doing sessions around certain particular things that they use, specific things around iPads and things like that. What we're more into is the idea that people can sit down and talk to each other, can connect with each other around the less than mainstream sorts of things that are going on. I mean, I'd like to see the whole makerspace idea become mainstream, but it's not there yet, and that's what we're working toward, I think.
Yeah, and Josh can add a little bit more to this, but I like to think of it as the preview of VSTE 2015.
There you go.
So, Josh,
jump in there.
We've talked a little bit personally about the rig that you're planning on bringing to VSTE as a whole, but can you talk a little bit about your perspective of the Hackerspace?
First of all, is my audio working?
Yes.
Okay, I had to switch devices here. To me, you guys are Andrew and Tim. You guys are the experts. I'm really kind of just what can a basic classroom teacher kind of do, and trying to fit that into a public school situation. So, what resonated for me with what Andrew just said was, there's all these things about scale that kind of keep you from doing cool stuff. I'm in Loudoun, and it's a big district, and we're going through such growing pains that the ability to do new things is kind of restricted as you're waiting on one thing or the other thing to happen. Whereas this kind of the makerspace, 3D printing and scanning and Arduinos and stuff like that is kind of this guerrilla thing that you can just kind of pull off and not really tell anybody about, and have kids do cool things. But I'm certainly not as far down the road as a lot of these guys are. I think my story that I'm sharing is just, that how do you get started? How do you just take a little chunk? And, I think sometimes you look at what somebody's doing in a less traditional K-12 environment, and you might say, we can't do that because we're such and such a school system. They can do that because they're this other kind of school. I don't really know what it is, but they do this other thing, and they can make a makerspace class. But my thing is kind of like, well, if you want to, you can fit this stuff in. You can kind of grow it on your own.
Yeah, we kind of say that all the time. You know, they can do that over at Flint Hill because they're a private school, and so. But you know, the truth is that a teacher can include this kind of thing in their classroom without necessarily getting permission from anybody or it being necessarily part of any curriculum, or they can wrap it around whatever curriculum they happen to have. You know, as far, especially in terms of science and math, and all it really takes is an interest from the teacher and some good connections.
One of the things I think is so difficult sometimes for teachers to wrap their minds around when they hear about whether it's maker education or the makerspace movements in outside of the school context is that we're classroom teachers, we know the value of a minute. Like when we think about this stuff, it sounds like, well, there's no on-ramp. Like there is no currently, and sure someone will sound a bad version of it at some point, but right now there is no like 15 steps to make your classroom into a perfect makerspace PD that you can sign up to and go for a week and like come back with a 3-ring binder full of marginal
Somebody's
utility.
probably selling that somewhere, though.
You know what? Gary and Sylvia wrote Invent to Learn, and it's fantastic, and
Yeah.
I'm glad they got to market first with something that actually is like meaningful substance about teacher craft before somebody flooded the market with a watered-down version. But my larger point is that what Josh was saying about the kind of like guerrilla way that we attract kids is really the way that teachers get attracted into something new. If we are, as all of our resumes claim, lifelong learners, then we are gathering new skills all the time that have only tangential utility for our classroom teaching presence. It is by giving voice and respect to not only those skills, but that kind of like that learning process, that independent acquisition of new knowledge and new skills, that constant willingness to start over at a new thing, to go back to floor suck again, as opposed to being the expert at it. By giving space and time to that experience for teachers, that's the door for all of this stuff. Because once you recognize the incredible amount of learning that takes place when you start over at the beginning of something, and you realize how humbling the experience of feeling out of your depth is, you can start to make some shifts in your classroom and practice to highlight that for your kids and to bring more material, more stuff that doesn't feel like the same homogenized product out of into the daily experience of your class.
And I think I should toss something else in here, and that is that it doesn't necessarily have to be hardware hacking. There's all sorts of different ways that you can take resources and kind of mold them to what you want. And I'm not the hardware type, but I really am into web hacking. How do you take web resources and remold them and get them up and running and let the kids have access to doing some authentic sorts of things with the web itself? And that's another aspect of this, and so we'll be talking about that as well. Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was just going to jump in here too. So the idea of this sort of came out of EduCon. I had my first EduCon experience in January, and the best session I went to was Chad's, where we hacked Candyland and sort of got our own game pieces and got our own stuff and sat around the table and thought, okay, let's make up a new game and how do games work. And so we made rules, and then we realized some of our rules didn't make any sense, and we all had money, but we didn't have any rules about that money, and and it was all just craziness until at the end, Laura Hilfiger from the Mozilla Foundation was throwing a shark across the board as one of the rules, and but it was just this idea. And then we'd stop every so often and say, what's going on here? What are we thinking about? What are we creating here? How are we doing it as a group? And that sort of thing. So you're absolutely right, Tim. I think people start hearing making, and they think about Make Magazine maybe, and sort of all the electronic stuff. And there's all these other ways that you can be involved in it. I mean, what a great creative activity for a writing class to get the juices going there, or those kinds of things. It doesn't have to be the pull-out class. It's something that you can do on a small scale without having to completely retool or worry about any testing and all those sorts of things. So I think that really started as the impetus for this, of how do we give people that kind of experience at the VSTE conference.
Yeah,
The
one of the
conference is great. You go away learning lots and lots of stuff, but what about those people who want to go and tinker and talk to people and have a different kind of experience?
Well, especially this is good for people who look at the program and maybe see one or two things on the program that fit what they're coming to see, and that this is a space where they can come and they can kind of mold their own conference experience, by getting together with even as few as 4 or 5 other people. One of the things I'm going to be bringing with me, I hope, if it comes, there's this little camera called a narrative camera that you wear around, and it takes a picture every 30 seconds wherever you go. And so you're doing a life logging sort of option there. So you go back and you look at the pictures and see what you saw and what you did that day. And it's a way of both documenting what you've done and kind of figuring out why you did what you did. And it's just one example of the kind of thing that we're talking about here.
So
Meg, yeah, I was going to say,
I see
Meg
has joined. Yeah, anything to add, Meg, or do you have any questions, or what intrigued you?
What intrigued you into joining us tonight?
Yes, all right, good.
So backing up on one of the things that Karen said about the I don't want to isolate it as the humanities application, but certainly thinking back over my last 10, 12 years on the internet, one of the most vibrant, what I would consider to be a maker community that I've ever found, was the group from building story games, both from the Forge and now from the new story games board. Like, these are people who are playing in face-to-face tabletop situations with no technology more complicated than a D6, building this elaborate infrastructure through everything we talk about in the design process, like that deep empathetic connection, the repeated prototyping and testing, the kind of like incredibly socially embedded evaluative process, so that what you're really doing is not just like taking a single individual's monolithic idea and trying to execute it in isolation, present it to a shocked and then ultimately impressed world, but you are building and creating things that your community cares about deeply, even if it's fundamentally fringe from any larger superset. But that's the environment all of our kids are going to grow up in. They're going to live in the era of 102 fans, and they're going to live in the era of long-tail micro-content, where whatever the thing is that they decide that they're going to be passionate experts on, there's not only going to be a community of other passionate experts to share and step, there's going to be a community of not so passionate, not so expert information seekers out there who will like absolutely nearly worship them for having that in-depth knowledge of the locks used on coin-operated parking meters manufactured in the U.S. between 1920 and 1975.
Okay.
I bought one on eBay and I didn't know how to get a key for the lock. There's a forum. They know their stuff. So
yeah, I've got up in my closet. I've got an old Apple Newton, and there is actually a community around hacking Newtons, which I thought was just, who knows? I mean, there's little programs you can download. There's little hardware pieces you can add into it. They've got a complete schematic of the interface, interconnections for it. So, I mean, these are all kinds of examples of how do we take something that we're interested in and get together with a community to learn how we can make it more useful, more fun, more weird, however you want to do this is basically what it comes down to.
Can I tell a story from my class this week that I'm kind of excited about?
Sure.
That kind of touches on that. So I have a kid who, and these are current 8th graders, so they're born in 1999, maybe 2000. Is that 14? Yeah, just about.
That's about 14 years, yeah.
So he brought in, we were having a discussion of what your first video game you ever played was, and the next day he brought in his Super Nintendo with my absolute favorite Super Nintendo game of all time, Tetris Attack.
Okay.
Which is not at all like Tetris, but does not really relevant to the story. Anyway, he's this kid with a Super Nintendo, and he's like, I want to do something with it. So the first thing you do is you buy the weird hex bolt that isn't a standard hex bolt, and take it apart and look at what the design of a Super Nintendo, which is at this point one PCB with like 6 chips on it and a cartridge slot. So all of a sudden he realizes that the plastic box is just a plastic box, and his kind of atomic theory of the consumer electronics universe has been fundamentally shattered. So then he decides he wants to make some mods to it, and starts really simple and makes an LED that goes on when the power is on, which is really simple as a circuit, but involves watching a bunch of YouTube videos and looking at schematics and figuring out where he can solder 2 points to the bottom of an existing Super Nintendo to get an LED out, and drills a hole in the plastic, and all of a sudden that's 2 more like fundamental assumptions we make about the material world we inhabit as consumers, which is that you can have a better idea than the original designer, especially if that original designer worked 30 years ago, and you can make changes to the things that you've purchased because you've purchased them and they're yours. And so he puts a light in and he turns it on and it works, and now he's got a little light on his Super Nintendo, and it's not the greatest project that mankind has ever seen. And when I left class today, there was 2 kids playing Tetris Attack, which is great because it's a fantastic game that should be played by all people. And there was 2 other kids looking at material from Ben Heck about how to make the Super Nintendo or other things into fully portable systems, which means all of a sudden they're now having to learn about how batteries work and how you discharge power and how you judge power requirements, and they have to figure out how you get extra screens and how are you going to bridge a small like portable LCD screen into the fat RCA interface of the Super Nintendo. All of these things are happening because he had a toy that he wanted to play with. He wanted to get away with playing with it in school, and now there's this whole churn of learning and investigation that has absolutely zero adult impetus, so they don't recognize that it's harder than most science classes.
Well, and that's the other part of it is that it doesn't, they're not really necessarily learning specific math skills or specific science skills or things like that, but they are learning the skills in problem solving that they really cannot get any other way, because they've got a desire, a passion to know something, and so they're hacking their way through, iterating their way through, figuring out what needs to be done in order for them to reach whatever goal they've set for themselves. And they find out very quickly that maybe their goals need to change as they go along as well, because things may not be going in the right direction for them. So they say, okay, well, maybe I can try this and make this and get to this point, and maybe we'll figure out where we go from that point. And so it's the kind of what we I don't know, in our district we keep talking about these higher level thinking skills. That's what higher level thinking skills are. Is how do you get something to do what you want it to do? How do you make it work for what you're trying to do? And that's the kind of valuable learning that we just don't recognize anymore in the age of testing. So, I'm at this point, I think we've gotten through the philosophy of it. As far as the mechanics of it, whoever's out there, I don't know who's hearing this or who's necessarily going to hear it, but we'd like anybody that wants to participate in this to let us know. Josh, did you get your acceptance from the formal program committee?
Yes, I got accepted for the short program, so that's something I can pretty much whip off, and the long one got axed, and that would have been a lot of work to do, so that's actually probably a good thing.
Well, what we would like to do with you and other people who are going to be in the formal program is maybe have you come down to Hackerspace, before or after your session and everything, not necessarily directly after your session, but and then it gives people a chance to have a little discussion around the ideas that you talked about there, and maybe a little hands-on experience with what you're bringing with you.
Yeah, especially for presenters like Josh that have such a very real physical component to what's going on. The other option I think that's out there is that especially teachers who have either material that they're working on with students in some context or a developing interest in one of the any number of craft hobby areas that surround this kind of like hackerspace maker ed movement. This is a place where even without there's no significant months ahead formal approval process. Like if you have a thing that you would like to come and demo, it is a relatively simple process to unconference yourself into a place and an audience and some time. And that's a way that we can really build these connections that are, I know for a lot of people the idea of like, well, if I'm going to present at a conference, it has to be not the thing that I'm interested in or the thing that I'm trying to do or the thing that I might do. It has to be like the victory lap of like, here's are the things that I've done that are awesome. And look at all of these things. There's a lot of our work as educators that is constantly developing, and it'd be really nice to be able to find peers and support for that before we're at the laurel stage.
And we're not going to put any specific time restraints on you either. If you've got something that doesn't, goes a little longer than an hour, we'll find you space for it. And if you only want to come down there and show off something for 15, 20 minutes, it's good with us.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I find really fascinating about this is that one of Gary's lines is always that, isn't it so convenient that everything that's important in human knowledge is easily compressed into integer number of semesters? There are things that are great in our lives that we would like to share that are not always 60 minutes long. So one of the things that I will absolutely be doing several times during the VSTE weekend is sharing the process for making small origami sculptures with either vibration motors or LEDs in them. It takes about 15 minutes to show someone how to do it and add a light to a crane or a box. This is assuming that you can actually fold an origami crane or box, which takes me about an hour and a half. So either way, I wouldn't make a good presentation out of it, but it's a great thing for the hackerspace.
If they put you up in the front of a room, the people halfway back wouldn't be able to see what you were doing anyway. So
I can get Elmo for that. I hear the document cameras are great.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah.
But yeah, that's the thing, is the things that are experiential and hands-on that mean a lot more to us as something that we can experience as learners rather than things that we can hear about as students.
So here's my biggest concern, I guess, is, and I think of, I have friends who are homeschooling, but they like to call it unschooling their daughter. How do we unconference our conference attendees? Because this is going to be something different from anything VSTE's ever done before, and potentially anything they've experienced at a regular conference before. They're used to the idea of, I pick out the sessions I want to go to, I sit conveniently, 3 rows from the back just in case I want to slip out later, I set up my little space and I listen, maybe ask a question or two, but this idea of sort of wandering through and tinkering and maybe sharing something, my thing is, how do we educate our attendees as to sort of the appropriate behaviors? I know that's ridiculous to say in this context, but I think there's some educating we need to do.
Well, that's like what Andrew said, is that we're kind of previewing VSTE 2015, because this is where we start the process of helping people understand that there are alternative ways to do conferences. I mean, there's, like I said earlier, there's this big EdCamp movement that's out there, and but as many people have attended EdCamp, there are vastly many more teachers who have never been to one, and so they have no idea of what an EdCamp experience is, or the idea that you go to a conference and there's no program there. You make the program in the first hour that you're there. And maybe you jump in and be part of the program and not just an attendee. And that's kind of what we're trying to do here, is kind of like a little unconference / whatever sort of thing.
One of the things that's kind of seems simple and prop comic-y, but it really helps to have signs. One of the things that I do a lot when I'm working with kids is there'll be a couple of kids who are essentially puttering. They've got some ideas, they've got a toy that they're playing with, they have not mentally committed themselves to actually doing something, and if there was a loud noise or a bright light, they would probably scamper off to something else because they're 13 and that's the way their nervous system functions. But if I walk around and take one of the 2x2 sheets of whiteboard that we have and I scroll on it in big letters like, this is the thing you're doing, and put it by the side of the table, all of a sudden there's a bunch of other kids in the class who will look up, see that there's a sign, and go over and start talking to them about like, oh, what are you doing over here? And all of a sudden that sign kind of formalizes it into a thing. It's whiteboard, it can get erased, it's not forever and a day, but it's enough to like, put a bird on it and really like make it into a thing that people will come in and investigate. And I think that's a good way to do it in our hackerspace as well. Is there's going to be a lot of these informal conversations, and when a conversation is ready to like scale up and like announce, if there's a little whiteboard sign, even if it's only 2 or 3 people sitting around having a conversation, then the next batch of folks who come down the stairs, they'll walk around and say like, oh, these people here are discussing something I'm interested in, and it all of a sudden actually ties back into our conference mode where we can start a conversation with a stranger knowing that we're all relatively on the same page with a particular interest, rather than the kind of awkward socializing mode where everyone's milling around in the lunchroom and you have to start on the small talk and then work into the stuff that you find fascinating. If anything, the hackerspace is catering to us on the particular end of the social awkwardness spectrum, that we want to start talking about the thing first, and an hour later I will probably get your name, and that's my rough timing for these things.
Well, and what I'm hoping is that the people who will attend VSTE are curious enough that they may come, just stop down and see what things are, and then kind of start forming their own conversations around the people that they happen to run into down there. As we were saying, this is an education process. We have to teach people to try and make their own conference as opposed to relying entirely on the program. Now there'll be some things in the program. Anything that we get ahead of time, since we're doing a digital program, it becomes easy to put into the program there. But I also want to see just what kind of things can pop up just from a little bit of buzz and a little bit of social media and a little bit of just telling people to tell each other.
The hackerspace will be a very good test of the Twitter presence of VSTE.
That's one thing, yeah. I mean, Karen, I hate to put you on the spot of this. You're as the boss of this whole thing, but is this an idea that you think can grow as part of it, or does it always remain just kind of a sidebar? Because I mean, I can see.
You mean
as far
2015 really would be the VSTE unconference?
Not necessarily, but I'd like to see it become a larger part of the conference than just a small sidebar there.
My quip was trying to talk about the topics rather than necessarily the structure, but we can go on with this.
Right. I mean, I think that we're trying to promote it in other ways by having formal sessions that are conversations. Someone else got in touch with me and said, the best part of conferences I go to are those hallway conversations. So here's 10 topics that I'd be interested in talking to other people about. So those we did organize more formally, but we're promoting the idea of don't come with your 700 PowerPoint slides and, like Andrew said, and sort of have to highlight the wonderful things you did. Don't bring any PowerPoint slides and just have questions for people, or be willing to tell your story and be willing to focus on the lessons learned and this is what I would have done if I had known, those kinds of things. So I think we're trying to promote that as a general move away from the stand and deliver and really trying to engage the community as part of the conference experience.
And I think a conference can include those things. I mean, there's certainly a place for some more formal presentations. I like a good keynote as well as as something
Sure.
that can inspire and can make you laugh and everything like that. But there has to be places for other things going on. Like I was saying, I go to ISTE and go to very few sessions anymore because I'm running into people in the hallway. I'm going to the lounges. I'm sitting in what ISTE calls the playgrounds areas, and I'm finding things that I wouldn't necessarily find in the program. And that's kind of what I'd like to see more of, at our conference.
I agree. I agree. I think the other piece, though, to keep in mind is sort of what I got back to when I said about educating people. At a conference, we're also completely differentiating instruction. We have every possible type of learner there, and there are people who they like to learn by sitting and listening to someone and hearing an expert talk about what they did and so on and so forth. And then other people, I think, like you, Tim, and you and I are probably about the same generation. We've been to a lot of conferences. I've gone to a lot of sessions. I am looking for something different potentially when I go to a conference than maybe the average conference goer. I spend a lot of time at ISTE at the poster sessions because I like talking to kids.
Right.
And that's another thing we've tried to really do with the VSTE conference is get some kids there on a Sunday when they don't have to take off school and that sort of thing, because I think we spend a lot of time talking about them, but not a whole lot of time talking to them.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the other pieces I like, or that we're trying to work towards.
The discussion of kids, I think, is pretty relevant because both from the photos I saw of the Charlottesville Maker Faire and my experience at the Mini Maker Faire for Emma Willard, is that there's conferences are often kid hostile. Like they are adult-oriented things. Kids come to present sometimes or to get an award or something like that, but they are always, they don't know where to get food. It's like it's a very strange environment your first time through, even as like a young teacher. And when you're 12 or 14, it's often especially off-putting.
It's intimidating.
Yeah, if anything, the thing the Hackerspace has to offer both kids and all attendees is a place to go and not feel like there's going to be some secret alarm that you've missed and suddenly everybody gets up and walks the other direction. This is going to be a place where you can come and really explore an idea. You can write a blog post after an amazing session without having to feel like you're hogging the outlet strip in the middle of the hallway or eating up somebody's chair for the next session. It is a place where you can come and take a little, sometimes I do like the crafting break in the middle of really stressful conferences where I just need to sit down and do something with my hands and not talk to anybody. And so I see the other people who are knitting or whatever it happens to be. That can be the place that can be the role of the hackerspace as well. And I think there's a lot of institutional power for that, because suddenly when you're sitting on the couch crocheting next to somebody who is folding a origami swan with a couple of lights in it, there's a conversation that's ready to happen, not just between those two individuals, but between those two crafts and disciplines. And I think that's where a lot of the really positive cross-pollination and learning happens in these spaces.
So we're hoping that a lot of that will happen in this particular space.
Upshot, Hackerspace, bring your needles.
Or bring whatever crafting tools you happen to have. Yeah. I know that on the Sunday, one of the awkward pieces of this is we're going to be in two different spaces for this. So, but on Sunday, when the kids are there, we're going to be up in the same area with them. So I'm hoping that we can get the kids to come over and talk more about what they're doing and show off a few of their projects in a larger context, and maybe talk about some of the projects they didn't bring.
Mm-hmm.
So. I just have to see what we can get to happen here. Josh, go ahead. We've been talking too much.
I guess when I was trying to understand what we're trying to accomplish here was, I was just kind of worried about the drive-by phenomena where somebody might come down for 5 or 10 minutes to see an activity. When I went to Mini Maker Faire Silver Springs, it was really kid-oriented, and it wasn't. I thought I'd talk to people about their projects, but it ended up being kind of this maker activity kind of thing where tons of kids who are going through these little 5-minute snippets of activities and then scurrying off to the next booth and then doing another little activity, but not really connecting anything. So my concern is that, you know, somebody may come down for a few minutes between sessions just to kind of see what's going on, but not. I'm just wondering how we can engage folks to maybe participate for longer term types of things rather than going, oh, well, that's a cool LED activity. Oh, that's, you know, squishy circuits. That's neat. Okay, I got to go.
Well, and you're right. I mean, I think that's why right now we're planning kind of a mixture of things where we have formal blocks of time when people are going to be presenting on a particular topic, but in a smaller venue with you know, opportunities to interact with the people in the group, and then we'll have others of these kind of impromptu sort of things where, you know, the 5, 10, 15-minute little things. So there'll be a mixture of these kinds of things. Opportunities for some longer conversations and opportunities for some, hey, I've got a couple of minutes, let's go down and see what's happening sort of deals. So yeah, I mean, it's an experiment at this point. We're trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. So
and from
I hope everybody will let us know what works and what doesn't.
Well, from a practical standpoint, I'm also wondering logistically, like, what's the internet like? Are we going to be able to do like a 1, 2, 3D catch, be able to have that be processed and then print something during this? You know what I mean? Like right now,
I have been promised that the internet is going to be very robust for this. What is that?
I've been scanning a pumpkin, but at this VSTE, it would be nice to actually scan like people or something historical or relevant. And,
well, that'll be an experiment to see how bad we can bring down the network.
I have also been promised a robust network, so I'm going with that.
Because what I'd really like to do also is see if we can bring people in from outside to participate a little bit as well. People who can't come, or you know, who you know, may not have ever thought to come.
I talked to some other teachers from around the state, which I'm always reminded that Virginia is a large state, who can't get kids down for the event, but wondered what we could do to be able to make those things more open and available. And I think that, if anything, that the Hackerspace is one of those places where there's going to be a lot of, hopefully, conversations that break that bound. And everybody hopes for a robust internet. I'm sure there is a maximum number of streamed presentations or video conferences that will take down even the most robust network. I'm planning on bringing my Minecraft server on a standalone box so that everyone can connect into it locally rather than trying to rely on getting out for that.
There you go. Bring your own server. That's a new one. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have a hardwired connection in the space, so that'll be one thing that'll help. So we don't have to depend on the wireless. But I mean, at this point, we're going to try our best to be able to involve people outside of the conference center and see how well the network holds up. So I don't know about scanning people, but we might be able to, you know, scan some small objects there. Anyway.
And I guess this is my own not knowledge about it. So scanning, someone takes bandwidth.
well, it's the digitization for 1, 2, 3D catch is done server side. So basically, you have to upload 40 photos or something, and then you have to download it. So
right.
So where are the servers located for them?
In Autodesk land, somewhere on the cloud.
Oh, okay. So this is part of Autodesk.
Yeah, I was just worried that we're going to be in some non-traditional hallway space that doesn't have any internet access or crammed into some corner somewhere.
My understanding, at the very least, is there's going to be a couple of machines that will have access, or at least one network drop that has access to actual hardwired networks. So
yeah, we'll have at least one wire in the space that we can pass around to people as necessary.
Yeah. So that seems like a reasonable way to take even the most bandwidth intensive things and move them off of the commons, basically.
And supposedly, is this hotel owned by Virginia Tech, or is it managed by Virginia Tech, something like that? So they're
I
supposed to
think they
be
actually own it, yeah.
they're supposed to be a high-tech organization. So we'll see how well they can keep us going.
We
Any
do test the
conference.
limits of networks, unfortunately.
Well, and any conference I've ever been to has always had some Wi-Fi problems in certain areas because everybody tries to hit something at the same time. But we're gonna do our best to see what we can do with that. Extend the network a little bit. I don't know. Like I was saying earlier, we want to involve as many people in this as possible. So if you're out there listening and you'd like to participate in this, contact one of us, and we'll be glad to find out what you're doing and even put you on the program. We don't have any sort of formal approval process in the program. If it sounds interesting, we'll put you in there.
Yeah.
So how are we sharing out? Are we live blogging, microblogging, photo streaming?
That's something we're going to probably determine as we go along. I'm not sure. We'll be able to. One of the things that is going to be relatively new this year is that we have an actual videographer who's going to be coming along, and he's going to be doing some video work of our sessions and other people's sessions, and they'll go up on the Vista YouTube channel. And we can certainly take some of our own and put them up there as well. So I say that however you think we should document this and share it, we've got channels to do that. Karen, if we got
Right, this year more than ever, there'll be a lot more streaming going on, I think, both formally and informally as well.
And we have access to the Twitter stream. We have access to we have Edmodo that we're going to be using for some of this stuff as well. We can use the Google Plus stream for that. The harder part is not putting it up there. The harder part is making sure people find it. And I think that's what we have to work at this. And I want to set up some old-fashioned sort of analog things where we just have people come down and on a whiteboard just put their Twitter handle, put their URL, whatever they want, and maybe their area of interest, and then they can share things that way as well.
Yeah, because for me, as much as I love the design and making part, I think the essential skill for the students is also sharing and adding to the sum of human knowledge. And so it's one thing to do things at a conference, but I'd kind of like to also have that step of how do we show people what we've done so they can add on to that and modify it.
And that was the area of interest I was talking about earlier. Is I'm all into people having their own space on the web, and how do you share things yourself rather than rely on Facebook to do it, or rely on some other organization to do it. So that's something we're going to be talking about also, is how and why should you have your own space on the web. And that's part of hacking too, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And some of the UMW folks are going to make some presentations and talk about that.
Tim Owens is going to talk about that, and we're going to bring in a couple people from Mary Washington by over Google Hangout or something. And I don't know who else is coming to the conference, but we'll get some other people in there. So yeah, I mean, you're right, Josh. You can have all these great ideas and you can have all these wonderful things, but if you can't share them with people, then they just don't get out. And the conference is a relatively small opportunity to share, and it has to go beyond the conference. So, and that's again, I'm hoping that people make connections here, and they start building those connections after the conference is over, and continue sharing ideas with everybody, and we form sort of a network outside of after the conference that we can build on the following year. I'm hoping this is, like I said, this is a growing sort of thing that starts here and kind of grows over the next couple of years.
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest challenges I find with going from the face-to-face event then back to the virtual. We do the summer face-to-face events, but we just don't seem to then extend that conversation. That sort of the same group of people who have always had the conversation continue it, but I haven't quite figured out the helping others feel welcome to continue the conversation and then moving it forward.
Well, and you mentioned EduCon before. I found this will be my sixth one, seventh one, however long it's been going. And every year it seems like people form little networks from EduCon that build outside of it. And it's the fact that you get to meet people face to face and you link up with people who have similar interests, and it's a growing sort of thing, because I've seen the networks from EduCon really blossom from the first conference through the last one. So that's the kind of thing I'd like to see happening in this kind of venue.
And I think the interesting thing about EduCon, because certainly I think every conference organizer wants to say that about their event, and the thing that I find so interesting and powerful about the groups and the bonds that form out of EduCon is that almost all of those are focused on some active thing that they are going to do, even if they are not they're not in the same school, they're not in the same state. There's a thing that they're going to do, and we live in a world where that isn't the barrier to have it be something that you can do. So you now have, they're not just like friendships that come out of there. There's faculty rooms that get created at EduCon that last for years and years. There are relationships that are the defining professional, they're the defining colleague of your year that you've had known on Twitter but then spent 2 days with, and then they are your backbone for the next 6 months. Certainly, I think I had never actually met Laura Blankenship until last EduCon, and there's not a week, probably a day that goes by where I'm not really very much tossing core matters of craft around with her. And the same thing goes for Chad Sansing, who's no longer in Albemarle. I'm not sure what district he's in. But so he's another person who's...
Not Stafford, no.
Yeah, that's what I think we're looking for in our hackerspace. It's not just oh, you've got my job in another space, but you can be an ally and both an intellectual and a emotional support system when I'm trying to do this thing that is broader and bigger than anything I've tried under my job title ever before.
And some of the most valuable things I get out of things like this is I get examples to point to when people say, well, we can't possibly do something like that. Well, if you look over here in this area, it may be a smaller district because everybody's smaller than we are. They're doing these kinds of things with students, and the students are learning, and the students are growing in this way. And so why don't we just give this a try? And half the time it actually works, and we do go ahead and give it a try based on some of the things I've learned from other people. And it's a way of moving things forward in ways that you really couldn't before.
So Josh said something about the drive-by phenomenon, and aside from the fact that Silver Spring Maker Faire sounds kind of awesome for kids, and I'm sad I missed it. But that's certainly something that we can talk about in the weeks and months to come, just as Meg mentioned the idea of sending out more teaser materials to get people a sense of what there is to do in the hackerspace and who are the people that you might meet in the hackerspace and what is welcome. So there's a sense of when you're packing your bag, what things you should throw in, just in case. Those are all meaningful conversations about organization and experience design that we can dive deep into in the next couple of weeks and hopefully find ways to enhance the stickiness of these both experiences and conversations.
Because, not to be too frivolous about this, but I think, Andrew, there are going to be people who are interested in the fact that you allowed an 8th grader to use a soldering iron in your classroom. I don't know, but there are some teachers out there for whom that would not be something they would think about necessarily. So,
to be fair, I think most of the teachers who feel like that are the ones who actually themselves feel uncomfortable using a soldering iron, which is why we'll have a bunch of soldering irons.
Could be.
We'll have a bunch of soldering irons in the hackerspace so that they can try it out and see that the chances of them dropping on a very nice plush carpet is pretty low.
And that really goes to a conversation.
Okay, it better be 0, Andrew.
No, please. Carpet
I'm just teasing.
Carpet can be fixed.
Yes, it can.
But that goes to a conversation we had in another group earlier this week about it all comes back to trust. How much do you trust students? And you can trust students if you teach them the right way to do things and give them examples for what's the ethical and moral and proper way of doing things. And like I tell teachers, you've got 150 students, because I work with secondary, and you can probably point out the 2 or 3 kids who are going to foul up, but that's no reason not to let the rest of the kids have the opportunity to do some things that they might normally not be able to do in a classroom. So,
well,
it comes back to trust.
A counterpoint to that is I'm having kids assemble 3D printers, high school kids who are STEM kids who are at an academy for science, and they're going to go on science careers. And past couple weeks we're learning screwdrivers. So righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. And, in 3 years, these kids may be in a lab where there's millions of dollars of equipment.
Sure.
And so,
You're right.
Don't you want those kids to know those skills and have those skills before they get out there?
Yeah, I work primarily in middle school, and one of the great things about it that any middle school worth its salt has to recognize that we have to be the place where the cost of making mistakes is lowest and the reward for making mistakes is highest, because they're going to make such a staggeringly large number of them here. And so when Tim talks about building trust, one of the things that I find, even when it comes to issues of safety, about building trust is that they have to know that it's not a teacher trap. So many things we do in schools and classrooms are teacher traps. Like, I'm going to tell you to do it like this, and if you don't do it like this, it's not just that, like, you don't get A and not A. It's you didn't do it like this, so there's this huge disproportionate response to that action. When kids do dumb things with power tools, which they will do dumb things with power tools, the response is to correct them so that they don't hurt themselves. It's not to, like, make them sit in the corner with, I did a dumb thing with the drill for the rest of the day. And that's, I think, true for teachers as well. When I guess most people, when they're confronted with a new experience that they feel not just, like, unfamiliar with but nervous about, we need to make sure that the part of the trust agreement is that when you fail and mess up, it's going to be okay, because that's what we're expecting. You're allowed to do it, not just once, not just twice. You're allowed to do it a dozen times, because that's what we mean by learning. You don't have to just optimize and spend your life focusing on those things that you had a 2% competitive advantage on the first time you tried them. You can start some things that are legitimately complicated and hard and build towards competency.
Well, and that's the whole philosophy behind hacking in the first place. Is nobody ever gets anything right the first time when you're hacking at it. You're trying it, you're experimenting. It works. It does, something works. We incorporate that, and we try something else, and it's an experimental process. And hacking is just an informal approach to a formal scientific process, I think. And that's what we really have to teach kids, because I think that's the way a lot of things work these days. Is we're working on some things that are unknown, so we don't really know anything more than the first step. So where do we go after that? We keep trying things and see where the next step is. So, and that's what we hope this will be more than anything else, is a chance for people to just kind of talk about what those next steps are.
And so, not to disappoint Gary, we have managed to fit this into exactly an hour.
Yes.
We're welcome to keep the room open and continue to talk, but we always say we'll go for an hour, so that's That's where we are, and I think have done a nice job of outlining it. So in taking Meg's advice, I think there might be perhaps an email to draft here out to attendees, particularly maybe in another week or so, and we could even include the link to this archive video to say, here's what it is, and here's what you might consider bringing or talking about, or how you can participate as well, so that people understand the role that they might play too, because I think the invitation is a good idea rather than just kind of wandering down. Know that you're welcome to be there and people want to hear from you.
Yeah, we'll be doing a lot more of the kind of teasing thing as we get closer to the conference. I've done a few things with Twitter and everything, a few things on Facebook, but I don't think people will really be starting to pay attention until we get within a few weeks of the conference anyway. So, and I hope we didn't disturb Meg's husband in the process of this. So.
Right. My husband laughed about the comment about the soldering iron. He thought that was funny.
Well, if anyone wants to get in touch with anybody here and ask other questions about the VSTE Hackerspace, we're all really accessible on Twitter. I'm Tie in Jeans, which is not fashion advice that I would offer, but Tie and Jeans on Twitter.
And I'm just my name, so Tim Stahmer on Twitter. And contact either one of us if anybody's listening out there, or if anybody's listening after the fact. Contact either one of us and let us know what you'd like to do, and we'll fit you in.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks so much, folks. And Josh and Meg, thanks for hopping on board with us as well. Josh, we're looking forward, and actually Meg too, we're looking forward to seeing both of you at the conference. And you keep saying it's so far away, Tim, and I feel like it's next week. I know we have a couple more weeks at least, but it's coming on.
I'm not a long-term planner, so this has been an exercise for me anyway. So
has it? Okay, well, good. Well, I'm glad we're challenging you a little bit. Anyway, folks, welcome for coming. Oh, yes.
No, that's fine.
So
close it out.
So thanks for coming, folks. I'll fill this out by saying we're having a similar, not the same conversation, but Monday at 3:30, Becky Fisher and Keith Reeves, both VSTE board members. Becky's with Albemarle County and Keith is in Arlington, will be coming together for a Google Hangout. We're calling these VSTE Conversations, and they're going to be talking about a topic that has come up quite a bit. This evening we managed to have more than an hour conversation, and I think we only mentioned testing once or twice, but it had been my experience sort of all summer long doing face-to-face events that we got to the point where we were all sort of excited about something, and then somebody said, oh, but what about the SOL, or oh, what about testing, and what a problem that is. And so Keith and Becky's conversation is going to be about how we start redirecting the conversation back to focusing on learning rather than testing and accountability. And I think this fits right in with this idea of making and hackerspaces as being a place where we get outside of what has become, in some cases, pretty confining classroom spaces. And so it really is meant to be a conversation. They'll have short things to talk about, but it's an experiment we're doing. It's scheduled for 3:30 with the idea that folks are just sort of sitting down after sending the kids off on the bus, maybe a cup of coffee or a Diet Coke, and just coming together to really talk about how we can start changing these conversations. Becky, of course, is from Albemarle, which I would guess is, I can't say most progressive school division in our state, but certainly a place where they're managing to steer that conversation in a different kind of direction. And Keith Reeves is kind of a radical when it comes to talking about learning and how we need to, the rather explosive changes we need to make to our schools. So that'll be 3:30. Same deal. We'll put up the Google Hangout link in the Google Plus community, and then also be broadcasting it live through YouTube. So that's Monday afternoon at 3:30. And then if you're looking for a more traditional webinar experience, Wednesday at 8 o'clock, we're partnering with VASCD to do a session on technology and mathematics learning. That will feature a couple of math specialists from across the state. Actually, Andrew, I think your math teacher from Flint Hill is going to be joining us.
Penny?
Math supervisor, maybe Michael.
I did
will
see
be.
somebody from Flint Hill that was scheduled there. Yeah.
Yes.
Check that out.
So it'll be Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. So thanks, folks, for joining us. The archive is pretty much immediately available. I might do a little trimming at the beginning, but I don't think I'll do much. And
Don't do any
have a great
trimming.
rest of the evening.
All right.
I won't do any trimming. All right, guys. Well,
Thank
thanks
you.
for coming. Thanks, Meg. And Andrew and Tim, I'm very excited about this. Thanks so much for
It should be a lot
doing
of
it,
fun.
and thanks for doing the session. Yeah, I think so too.
Are you going
Have
to
a great
John
evening,
Becker's
folks.
thing on Saturday?
I'll be there.
Okay.
I'm bringing the coffee.
I'll be down there too.
I saw you on the list.
I've got
Okay, good.
I've got to learn something about the law, so I can talk back to some of these people.
Oh, okay, good. Well, yeah, I should mention that if anybody's not doing anything on Saturday from 9 to 12, we'll be at Chickahominy Middle School in Mechanicsville talking about technology, the law, and education. And it's free.
Oh, cool.
So come on down.
Oh.
All right, folks, I'm hitting the end broadcast button, and